we've already got a new card, and we're going to take a deep dive here into Transfer Student and all of its various effects in this video.
Hey, buddy, watch this.
All right, things have slowed down. That first video for the expansion's always frenetic, so we can take our time a little more with this one. And a brand new card that mysteriously got revealed. We found this like on stream on the card library website, and it's Onyx Scribe, a 6-mana 4/9 dragon with Spellburst. And when you Spellburst this, it gets 2 random spells from your class added to your hand. Now, before I get into this, I think I did everybody a disservice a little bit in review 1, not covering Spellburst in more detail. I made an assumption that my 2-minute recap video breaking down the keyword would be sufficient, but clearly there are a ton of people who still don't understand what Spellburst means. So just to reiterate, Spellburst is a one-time effect. Once you cast a spell and activate the Spellburst, it no longer goes off. So you don't get to do this like time and time again, over and over again. Otherwise, there'd be some totally ridiculous bonkers, just absurd combos that would completely break the game. So think about it like a Divine Shield that pops once a spell is cast. So you play the minion, it has Spellburst active, you cast a spell from hand, Spellburst goes away, it redeems the effect, and it no longer does anything on its Spellburst. So one-time effect. Now that said, for the Onyx Scribe here, what you have is a pretty hefty minion, a big 4/9 for 6 mana. That's, a lot of health to chew through. But I think here an effect, unfortunately, that's just a little bit too slow. So essentially, you have to combo this out with a spell if you want to realize that value immediately. And that means you're spending 6 mana on a big minion that doesn't immediately impact the board with no rush, no taunt. So it's just kind of plopped out there, which is hard to find those moments to do in Hearthstone. And then you got to follow it up with even more mana commitment outside of maybe a 0 mana spell. So you're maybe spending 2, 3, 4 mana on top of this. And it's hard to spend all of that mana and not make an impact on the board and succeed in Hearthstone. So this is a really low tempo, but of course a high value sort of card, because if you do activate that Spellburst, you're going to get 2 pretty nice spells in return on average and generate some resources and throw down a big body. So, I think this is the kind of card that's really exciting sometimes when you get it off of a Draconic Lackey, or maybe it gets summoned off of Ysera Unleashed in Druid, and Druid's thrilled because they have that 0 mana Bog Beam anyway, and they're like, yes, let's go, some free spells. So I think this is a card that will be important for Hearthstone, and it will certainly have an impact on games because it is fine in that dragon pool. But I think in almost no way does this ever really get played in a deck. You're never going to put this in your deck list, because I think it has a limited return on its value. It can't scale forever like something like Lyra that would just add a ton of spells back to your hand, right? And beyond that, it takes a big mana commitment to get it off, even more than something like, say, Cobalt Spellkin, right? Which is similar in some ways. Clearly, those spells are defined and capped. You can't get 10 mana spells off your Cobalt Spellkin, but you don't have to spend any additional mana. You're not committing quite as much to pulling it off. So in that way, I think this card's really limited to its peers as a constructed deck kind of card, but as a random generation, it's totally fine. So next up here, we finally have all the details on Transfer Student. I kind of teased this card a little bit in my first review, but now that we know how everything works, I think we can actually give it a deep dive and score it. And people are already, in fact, playing Transfer Student. We spent some time playing it earlier today. Stay tuned for some videos on that. But here you'll see on the top left of the screen above my head up there, the effects this card gets based on boards in standard format. I have the wild format stuff we're going to pull up here in a second, but I primarily want to talk about standard format because it's how we talk about in our reviews. So right now there are how many different boards? Looks like maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 total boards for Transfer Students. You have about a 1 in 10 chance roughly of hitting whatever effect you're looking for Transfer Student. I guess I should recap how this works. It's just totally based on the game board. You know how there are a ton of different game boards in Hearthstone. Each time you load into a game, depending on the game board, Transfer Student's going to basically transform into something different and have the effects listed there. Like maybe it deals 2 damage, maybe it has Divine Shield, maybe it has Reborn, etc. Now, given that 1 in 10 chance, what that means is there isn't really any reliable path here for transfer students. So, for instance, if you really care about, I don't know, adding a plague spell to your hand because you're like a control deck and you want some really nice, meaty plague of deaths added to your hand, or maybe just happy with plague of flames, you can't guarantee you're going to get that, right? It's only 1 out of 10 times. So, a control deck can't run transfer student for that 10% upside. Maybe they're also happy discovering a dragon and a handful of other of these that kind of do control style things. But then you've got these other ones that aren't really control cards much at all. Like, are you really excited to give a minion +1/+2 as a control deck? No, of course not. So, if you get the Pandaria board, you're going to be really sad that your 2-drop's kind of dead. So it's always that balance between, is there enough upside here and is there enough match to what my deck is trying to achieve? Because, like, yeah, of course, all of these are pretty decent in a vacuum, right? Like a 2-mana 2/2 that deals 2 damage. Okay, sure. A 2-mana 2/2 with Divine Shield. Like, yeah, we've seen that card. That was pretty good in its era, right? Reborn, like, hey, that's Shotbot. Okay, cool. And you break it down. It's like, yeah, okay, actually, this is better than a lot of standard format Hearthstone cards. Like, of course, it kind of makes sense. But the problem is, random standard format Hearthstone cards aren't really that good. You're running specific things that play towards your play style and your game plan. You need control cards. You need hyper aggro cards. And this sometimes doesn't do that. Like, can this be an aggro card? Yeah, probably if it gets Reborn or Divine Shield or maybe the minion buff. But then sometimes it's like a resource generator that you're really not all that excited about. So who really runs this? Maybe Highlander lists that are kind of mid-rangey and can have a mix of any given thing are happy to do it. Maybe there are some aggro decks out there that are happy when this rolls into kind of the tempo, Divine Shield, Reborn, or Battlecry stuff, and they're okay if it also rolls into the value stuff. There are some decks that can certainly shift into the late game. Think about like Galakron Rogue, right? It needs some early game minions and ways to keep up on board, but then it can also shift into lots of value generation and resource generation in the late game. Maybe the same thing for something like Galakron Priest. So maybe those decks can run this, but remember they're running it over something else. It has to be better than an alternative, and I don't know that it's often going to be. Even already trying to play this, it's like hard to figure out what kind of deck you want to put it in. It always seems to have some limitations. So as far as I'm concerned, because all of these different effects go in different angles, it's going to be really hard to make Transfer Student work successfully in a list. If they were all aggro effects or all resource generators, then yeah, this card could make a lot of sense in different lists. But as it stands, it's just too disparate. It's just too pulled apart from itself. And because of that, I don't really think this is ever going to be a competitively viable card. It's just not going to make sense because there are too many down sides and too many low rolls for it to make up for the average strength being fairly high. Now, I also want to take a look here at the wild format effects. These will not affect my review. I review cards based on their impact in standard format, both now and potentially through the future. But I thought you might want to see these. I'm not going to run through them all individually, but feel free to take a screenshot if you hadn't seen them before. Basically, I think the same story applies in Wild. There are some actually even crazier effects in Wild, like some really, really powerful effects as far as I'm concerned. Namely, look at like Knights of the Frozen Throne. It's essentially Arphis for 2 less mana. It's just like power crept by 2 mana, which is insane. But the same problem exists. It's just, decks are doing really narrow, specific things in Wild. They have a perfect game plan they're trying to play towards. And this card just doesn't really deliver on that. It's going to fail most of the time. So, and there's, it's a 1 in 25 chance to get whatever specific thing you're looking for. So another just problem there. So moving back into standard, I do want to rate each of these individually, just kind of say like how good I think they are. Orgrimmar would deal 2 damage. It's a battle cry that's great. Can go face, can help you swing early boards. I think that's really good. Stormwind with the Divine Shield. Yeah, that used to be a good card with Shield and Minipod. I don't think that's as great in Hearthstone today. It's still fine. You're probably not upset with that one, but ultimately not better than average things. With Stranglethorn, you get Stealth and Poisonous. I'd say that's not very useful. We've seen similar cards that just don't make sense. I mean, it trades up, yeah, but Patient Assassin does the same thing. And this isn't really any better because the stats often don't matter. With Pandaria, you give a friendly minion +1/+2, which I think compares favorably to like Koltir and Chaplain or even Shattered Sun Cleric. So that seems good if you're playing a tempo deck, especially if you have a 1-drop that's going to really help you dominate the early game board. With Dalaran, you get a lackey added to your hand. I mean, that's totally fine. That's just better than Evil Cable Rat. With Uldum, you get Reborn. That makes this shot bot without a mech tag, but you know, it's not necessary that it's a mech anyway. So basically the same as Stormwind, essentially. The alternate Uldum board, because there's actually two, that's the one that you get a Plague spell added to your hand. That's pretty good. The Plagues are generally good. I mean, Plague of Murlocs can be awkward, and the Rogue Plague, Plague of Madness, can be tough to use too, but certainly Plague of Death and Plague of Flames are really powerful in particular. Plague of Wrath can be okay. So I'd say you're pretty happy on that one in most cases. Dragons, you just discover a dragon, so that's Draconic Lackey. We know that's good. A little bit more mana to spend, but no big deal. Ashes of Alan, this one's a little weird. We did get to use this. It's dormant for 2 turns, and it awakens and deals 3 damage to 2 random enemy minions. Like, in perfect scenarios, like, sure, that can be good, but I do think that doesn't line up all that well against lackeys and stuff. That 3 damage is going to hit a lackey. But it's only a 2-mana commitment to get a decent board swing a couple turns later, so it's a bit like Imprisoned Observer for Mage, just, you know, less universal in its effect. So that one's okay, I think, but just really situational and hard to line up. And then finally, for Scholomance Academy, the upcoming expansion, it's apparently going to be Battlecry, add a dual class card to your hand. Now, we haven't seen the dual class cards, but in general, I think, you know, play a small minion and generate a thing has been successful in Hearthstone, so that one's good too. So as you can see, on average, they're good. Like, these are all pretty individually good cards. It really just comes down to, do you want to run this in your deck because you don't know what you're going to get? And I think often you don't. You want to run something that you know is going to give you that consistent upside. It's going to fit into your game plan. So yeah, in a vacuum, an arena, you know, just as a theory, sure, Transfer Student is okay, but in practice and execution, I don't think decks are going to run this at all. Onyx Scribe is a 2-star card. Transfer Student is a 2-star card. And there you go, folks. More Scholomance Academy cards down. I do not know when we're getting more cards after this. They tease some card reveal schedule stuff, but it's still locked. Sometimes we have a little bit of a gap between the initial reveal and the card reveals, maybe with 1 or 2 like blog posts or videos dropping in the meantime. So perhaps we'll see more this week. Perhaps we won't. But I anticipate, you know, next week should really kick off strong for card reveals and card reviews. So of course, stay tuned. I would appreciate you subscribing to the channel. It slightly increases your chances of YouTube suggesting content, but it's also just nice for me to know that people are enjoying these reviews. That said, if you have thoughts on these cards, certainly feel free to share them. I always appreciate your guys' insights. So the comments are down there for that. But until then, thanks so very much for watching. And until next time, game on.